Welcome to Linux Saloon, a place to discuss tech, open source, and where Linux is always on tap. Each show, we have a talk about a Linux project, or we center on topics around something in the Linux and open source world. It could be a Linux distribution, desktop environment, or application, maybe a terminal application party maybe someday. We also discuss the news and take topics from somewhere around the world for an enjoyable chat. Anything that is Linux, tech, and open source related is on the table for discussion. I'm Nate, a Linux fitness and vintage tech enthusiast with an almost unhealthy obsession with the OpenSUSE project. And with me today is Sirvan, Eris, Jinda. Thank you so much for joining me. I was worried that I have to talk at the camera just by myself, and I can't do that. So welcome.
Hey guys, how's it all going today?
Fantastic.
Excellent job.
Sirvan's a little quiet today, it seems.
Oh,
Yeah.
he's a party animal.
Maybe he was out too late last night.
Sort of. I was watching a YouTube stream.
Oh, speaking of YouTube stream, actually I'll get to that in just a moment. Coming up tonight, we have a news flight. We'll check what's on the menu for next week. Do a no community report today. Don't have anything. And a last call. But first, what have you been doing in Linux or tech? I did an article this week. I don't know if you know what the C64 is. I know you know what the Commodore 64 is. I bring it up probably almost weekly. The Commodore 64 is an 8-bit computer that was released in 1982. Actually, it's 40 years old, I think, this month. Anyway, so there's somebody or a company called RetroGames. Their website's retrogames.biz, so they're called Retro Games. They released a re-implementation of the Commodore 64, but it's like ARM-based. It has USB and HDMI as opposed to the 40-plus-year-old ports on the Commodore 64. And so you can plug that into your TV, and it has like a nice carousel. You can even, it actually behaves like a Commodore 64, so you can program on it, save to disk images, and all kinds of fun stuff. So that is all. It's fun. It has a keyboard. It's a full-size thing. Well, anyway, that is a machine that I have, and I like it for like playing old Commodore 64 games because it's got a good experience. It's a well-polished product. And also, I feel like it's a little safer for the kids to mess around with than an actual hardware because the hardware's you have to adapt everything to make it work for modern stuff. And it has a carousel again, so like you can flip to whatever game you want or go to the USB stick and play games there. So there's a game. Don't know if you heard of him. He's a pretty big YouTuber. His name's the 8-bit guy, David Murray. He did a game called PETSCII Robots, and I bought this game. It's a pretty fantastic game. And it works great on old hardware. You can plug in this little adapter and use a Super NES controller for controlling it. And you can plug a USB controller. A Super NES USB controller, like Super NES-like USB controller, into the C64. But it doesn't behave the same way because just the way the program works. So I did a lot of digging and trying to understand how all this stuff works together. And there's these things called CJM files, I think that's correct. And you can configure a controller to behave in a certain way. And the problem was, I knew how a joystick-looking controller would work on there, but I didn't know how a gamepad, a Super NES controller, how that would work on there. So I had to do a lot of digging, and I ended up actually, I wouldn't say writing, but I created just a file to identify numbers, so I could actually go through and figure out what did what and what location, so I could figure out like where it was in this file, and I used some other cross-reference some resources initially. So I put together a configuration file, explain how the configuration file works and everything to play PETSCII Robots on the C64. So essentially, I created an article for a system. A small subset of retro gamers have this system, and an even smaller subset plays PETSCII Robots on that system. So a subset of a subset of a subset of gamers. So there's probably at least, I don't know, maybe a couple dozen. It's been actually viewed quite a bit. But so obviously it's not going to have a high traffic, whatever. That's not going to be seen a lot. But I was really excited that I accomplished something, and I was able to play PETSCII Robots on the C64 as though I were playing it on actual hardware with the same kind of experience. So anyway, it was fun. Also, I created as a bonus, I created another configuration file so that it'll actually the C64 will kick itself into VIC-20 mode and launch the VIC-20 version as well. So if you want to play the VIC-20 version of it. So an even smaller subset that would want to see that. So it was a lot of fun.
I thought you were gonna say I patched the program so that I could have my controller work.
No, I didn't patch it because actually the allowances for passing or identifying how you want a controller to behave is all done. So I took it to one additional level, and I wanted to see if I could get like a PlayStation style, like a dual stick controller to work with the game. And yes, and I also figured out how to add a few other functions, using like the R3 and L3 buttons, but pushing on the stick, so you can cycle your weapons and inventory items. So in a way, I almost sort of kind of like, enhanced from the original, because you can actually use an even beefier controller and so forth. And if you want to change it and make it the trigger buttons instead R2 and L2, you can do that as well. But I didn't set it up that way for reasons. But anyway, I did send it to the 8-bit guy, and he actually said, thank you. I'll probably include this on my website, so people who do want to do that, because he doesn't directly support the C64. So maybe, he appreciated it, and that was cool. So I'm working on a video for it. I'm about 2 minutes into editing, and I find I'm never like satisfied with anything. So I've been tweaking it quite a bit, but I'm about 20% of the way through. Hopefully it'll be a decent video. All right. Since there was some rousing conversation there.
Yeah, but it's still fun. You got to know about the 8-bit guy. At least, I mean, that's not boring at all, Nate. That's really cool stuff. The 8-bit guy's great.
It's kind of ASMR if you watch his restorations,
Mm-hmm.
where he cleans everything and then he retrobrites it. And it looks new at the end, basically.
Yeah.
It's like all working. And it almost seems like too good to be true, because you try doing something like that and it comes out horrible. And like, what happened? Like, he does it and it's perfect, and you try doing it, it's like, this is nowhere near how he does it.
Yeah, well, I think he has a lot of practice, so he's at a stage now where he's done it so much that it's, he's got all his formulas down and everything else. And there was somebody I watched that they retrobrighted something and it got like a marbling effect on it. I don't know if it was 8-bit guy or somebody else, but
I think he did it. There was like a glare, I think. Like he started using sunlight for a bit a while back, and then he used actual bulbs that had UV light, because that was more even. I think there was
Okay.
like a marbling effect. If you just use sunlight, there could be some kind of like shadow or something that makes it not even.
so I guess heat's an issue. It's got a certain amount of heat. There was somebody else who actually retrobrighted, but just used the sun to do it. But they also lived in California, I believe. So I think maybe the angle works better there. But it makes me wonder then, I don't understand the process then. If sun makes it turn yellow, but sun can also make it turn white.
Don't you have to chemically treat it to get that to work?
No, he did just air.
Really?
Yeah, and I didn't understand that.
I don't understand that either.
I don't think anybody truly has to explain how it works. I know there's sunlight involved, and there's the chemical that the 8-bit guy buys from like a beauty salon store.
Yep, it's
that's for like
hydrogen
straightening
peroxide.
hair. Yeah,
It's for bleaching hair, actually.
or bleaching hair. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So it's hydrogen peroxide. It's like industrial grade hydrogen peroxide, essentially cream that they put in people's hair, to make them, look more beautiful, I guess. And use it to make computers look more beautiful. Yeah, so I don't understand entirely, but I guess there's some sort of a fire retardant in the plastic that causes it to yellow, but not all plastics react the same way. So I don't know if you remember like the Super Nintendo, the Super NES. If you had an old one there, like some of the plastic would yellow, but not all the plastic necessarily. So it's kind of a weird thing.
Yeah, people usually take it apart and just put it to pieces themselves in the retrobrite, because you're kind of guessing how the other plastic is going to react. Because I think he did it with something that wasn't gray or like cream, and it came out kind of weird. I forgot exactly what the project was, but there was like a different color he used, and it came out different. I think he said that it didn't look like the new product. It looked a little bit different even than that. So
Low spec Linux laptop. He says, are they still working on releasing the Commander X16? Yes, they are. I got to actually play with one last weekend at the Vintage Computer Fest Midwest last week Sunday. I went to it, and I didn't announce I was going because I don't like to tell people where I'm going ahead of time because reasons. But it's actually a really nice looking product. There's still some chip shortages that's preventing full production right now, but they are getting closer to production on that. So welcome, Thomas and Schickel. I'm so glad you arrived. I was afraid that I'd have to do all the talking, and that would be terrible. I would tune myself out eventually. So thank you for being here. I see that you got something very special I can see by the logo on the top there. Thomas, congratulations.
Wow.
Do we know what he has?
Now he's just rubbing it in.
I had to show it off. I'm sorry.
No.
Especially
That's
to
okay.
people who actually
That's okay.
understand. May I talk about it for a few seconds?
Yes, give me 1 second. I just want to make sure I say hello to Schickel. Thank you for being here, Schickel.
Hello.
You've brought me so many laughs this week on Twitter. I don't know, like it's like you're on fire this week. But thank you.
It's been a good week.
It's been a great week, and I had some actual laugh out loud moments because of you. So thank you for that. Because sometimes you just need to laugh.
It's true.
So Thomas, you got yourself a SteamDeck. How do you like it? It's terrible.
No. In a word, I do like it.
That was more than
there-
one word. You said, in a word, I like it. That's 3 words.
Yeah,
in
that's
as
right.
few words as possible. I
Okay.
like it. I do have some small issues with it.
Okay.
One of the issues I have with it out of the box.
Is it you can't get your sausage fingers around to the backside buttons?
No, actually, I'm doing fine there. No, one of my first issues with it, before you even turn it on, it has a smell. And I've heard this reported by other people on r/SteamDeck too. And like it fades with time, but it kind of reminds you of that new car smell, almost.
Yeah.
If that
Well,
makes sense.
It's probably the plastics outgassing or off-gassing, depending on who you
Yep.
talk to.
I think it is, and like I don't smell it anymore after a day or two of using it, moderately. But it wasn't the most pleasant smell in the world. A couple other issues I have with it. When you are in desktop mode and you don't have a keyboard hooked up, it does not pop up an on-screen keyboard for you.
If you hold down the
So-
Steam key and you hit the
Right.
hit the
And I just recently learned that.
okay, all right.
But like, so in my mind, if you're in the Plasma desktop
Mhm.
and you need to type something in, I would expect that you could go to the system tray, hit that little up arrow, and there would be a little icon that I can hit that would pull up an on-screen keyboard.
That would be
There is no
fantastic.
icon.
You're right.
Right. And like, I get the keyboard shortcut or controller shortcut, whatever you want to call it. I do like that. For somebody who literally doesn't know any of those, which I imagine would be a minority, but I do see it being a possibility. I feel like having just that little icon would probably be good. I don't expect them to have something where they can detect where you're, tapping on a text input field. But just that little icon to pop it up would be nice.
That would be nice. Something else that would be nice too, and this is just the blatherings of a middle-aged man here, playing old games on new hardware. But it also would be nice if Valve would have included just like a little quick start guide that gave you
Yeah.
all those little things.
So there is a little sheet in the box. All it says is to plug it in and then hit the power button. When I first got it, I thought I had a defective unit, like out of the box, because when I turned it on, I plugged it in, it gave the little charging light like it was supposed to, all good there. I hit the power button, it made a little beeping noise. Like, okay, it's booting. Nothing. Screen didn't light up or anything. And I tried, pressing and holding it, tapping it, all these different things in order to actually get it to turn on. And I even checked that little sheet, and the sheet doesn't say whether you just tap it or press and hold it or what. So I had no idea what I was doing. Eventually I did get the screen to turn on and do its thing.
You literally just
But-
had to wait. I think the first time you boot it up, it's doing like it's going out to space and back to check something out. I guess looking for a Starlink satellite. I don't know what it's doing, but
Yeah, it's just weird. I wish I would have a little note in there that'd be like, first boot takes X amount of time usually. So those are my main issues with it. Everything else, I'm okay with it. I actually got it booting Draugr OS.
already, huh?
Yes. It's not installed to the internal storage, it's installed to the SD card, so
Okay.
I'm dual booting. I do like that the right touchpad works as a mouse when you're in the BIOS.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, getting to the BIOS is relatively easy. It's like you do on an Android phone. You hold volume up and power until you hear the beep, and then it drops you right at the BIOS. I have noticed that if you have a display hooked up and you turn it on, and then boot to a different OS than SteamOS. I don't know if SteamOS actually does this, but when you boot it up to a different OS, it doesn't use the internal display. And even when you mess around in your display settings in that other OS, it doesn't turn on that internal display. It acts like it's on, but it's not. And it'll just use that external display, which is kind of a pain.
You sure it's not just a Draugr OS problem?
It shouldn't be. Because it's just an embedded DisplayPort. And I've used embedded DisplayPort on Draugr OS before. My personal laptop, which runs Draugr OS, uses embedded DisplayPort. So I don't see that being a Draugr OS specific issue. The back buttons are nice. I don't use them as much as I thought I would, but I also use them more than I thought I would, depending on when you ask me about them. If that makes sense.
So the best usage that I have so far on those back buttons is stupid, but I'm kind of proud of it. Not really proud of it, but is you can set those buttons up so you can do one-handed Game Boy Advance play with just using your left hand and use those as your A and B buttons.
That makes
So,
sense.
yeah.
What
Obviously
I did
can't get
with
to start.
the only time I've used them so far is in Doom Eternal. In Doom Eternal, the D-pad, I think it's up changes your weapon mod and right changes your equipment launcher, and then bottom and left do other things. I just have the D-pad mapped to each of the 4 buttons.
Okay.
So that way because playing Doom Eternal on the Switch, my Switch Pro controller also has back buttons, so that's where I got that idea.
That's cool.
Yeah, it gets me to actually use those features more, which is something you actually need to do in that game. It'll probably be remapped again later to other things that I need to use more, but for right now, it's fine. I was going to mention something. Oh, if you boot any other OS other than SteamOS, I haven't tried Windows yet, and I probably won't ever. Audio does not work at all. It does not. I haven't actually looked to see how it detects the audio hardware in SteamOS, but as far as just looking at the Pulse Audio actually connected to Pipewire, the Pulse Audio control panel in XFCE, it doesn't see any audio hardware at all. I haven't tried with headphones and I haven't tried with Bluetooth, so one of those might work, but the internal speakers, nothing.
Huh. Well, I think I'm gonna have to give that an experiment at some point. I got a few too many things on the plate right now, but I think I'd like to give OpenSUSE Tumbleweed a try on that, because I wonder if maybe that OpenSUSE, because it has the newer kernel, that maybe it would detect and use the thingy.
For context, the kernel I was using when I saw that was kernel 5.19.8, so pretty recent. Apparently there should be patches coming down in the 6.0 kernel to fix that though. So pretty soon, especially with Tumbleweed. There wasn't one other thing I remembered. So actually I can show you this real quick. The lock screen was a good little thing. So in here, when you go to the quick settings, right here, you're able to control the on-screen overlay.
Mm-hmm.
You can also control underneath your current graphical settings as far as like screen refresh rate, whatever's running, its FPS limit, that sort of thing. The problem is you can do profiles with all the like screen refresh rate, anti-aliasing stuff, the frame rate cap, all that. This overlay thing, you don't get that profile support. Every time you go in or out of a game, you have to turn that on or off or change whatever you want it to. Ideally, that would honor the same profiles as the rest of your graphical settings. That way, if you go into a game and you just want your FPS counter up, it'll pull up your FPS counter out of the box. You don't need to use anything else. But as soon as you exit the game, your FPS counter goes away because you don't care about your FPS on, your home screen, provided that it's relatively smooth.
As far as gaming for you, do you see this as supplanting your desktop gaming station, or do you think this is going to just kind of be an add-on to your, like, just another console?
That's an interesting question. I've had it for only a couple days so far. I haven't been on my desktop much in the past few days to begin with. It will not replace the desktop. For context, Doom Eternal on my desktop at max settings, except motion blur, which is completely disabled, I get well over 300 FPS, sometimes over 400. On this, it gets over 100 with the same exact settings, which is still good.
That's really good for a small unit.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Wow.
But I
think 45 is like my target.
But it's also 50% of the performance that I'm used to, and I can't even play with ray tracing on here, whereas on my desktop I can.
Okay, that's fair.
So like the performance difference is worlds apart, but the performance for this is still really, really good. What this will likely end up being is when I go on like a road trip or when I'm just going somewhere and want a console, I'll probably bring this or the Switch, depending on which one's most charged at the time or whatever game I'm playing. And, there we go. If I feel like I want to do any development work, it's going to be this hands down because of how small it is and the fact that it's a Linux machine. I can boot into Draugr OS, write whatever code I want to on the CPU architecture that we currently support, and it should be fine. But if I just want to play games, boot into SteamOS if Draugr OS isn't at the point of gaming on this thing yet, and just play some games. No biggie. So it's an add-on, but a heavily used add-on.
All right, that's fair. I think it's a fantastic device, and I find that I don't. So this machine here is what I kind of set up to do, like some of my light gaming or whatever. I haven't used this machine for any kind of gaming since the SteamDeck because I can just sit on my couch and whittle away at some Pokemon game or whatever that is kind of like mind-numbing at the time. I'm really embarrassed that I like Pokemon, actually. I'm a 42-year-old man and I'm playing Pokemon. I don't know what's wrong with me.
Which Pokemon?
There's nothing wrong with that. Pokemon is universal.
Fire Red is what I'm playing right now.
Oh.
Yeah. You have taste.
Charizard is my dude. He's my dude.
Have you seen all those videos about people with the extreme challenge that they can only use one Pokemon during the whole game?
I have not. That seems impossible.
They randomize the game, and you can pick like 6 Pokemon or something like that.
Is that Nuzlocke?
Yeah,
Are you talking about Nuzlocke?
No, there's the Kaizo. I forgot the exact term. I think it's Kaizo. And so you pick like 6 Pokemon, right? And those are your favorite ones. And then if you pick six favorite Pokemon, you can look at the Pokemon that you get at the beginning because it's going to be random, right? And you can choose one of them as long as it's one of those favorites. If not, you got to pick the first one you picked. And then everything throughout the whole game is randomized. All the Pokemon are at different places. And you can't use legendaries. And you can only use the one Pokemon to beat the whole game.
So I have these little arguments with my boy because he's actually he knows his Pokemon. And so I always refer to my Charizard as being legendary because of how he can, one-shot things. And then he gets all upset because, like, Charizard is not a legendary Pokemon. I says, no. He is a legendary Pokemon.
No, Charizard is not legendary.
No, he's not legendary, but he is a legendary Pokemon. See, I'm arguing with you the same way I argue with him.
The Charizard card is legendary. It's the most expensive Pokemon trading card.
Really?
Yeah, it's popular. That's why they added so many other Mega Charizard, other
Yeah. Well,
Charizard X. Yeah, like some IP is very popular, so obviously they'll push it.
yep. I don't plan on buying any like plushies or anything like that. I don't like any merchandise. I don't care about that. But I just happen to like. I don't know why. It's just kind of like a mind-numbingly fun game to play because you think about like it's like rock paper scissor. Scissor beats paper, paper beats rock, rock beats scissor. It's kind of that same thing with the Pokemon, only a little bit more complex and
then after a few tries, you'll try to look at an ideal party, sort of like having 6 Pokemon with like different strengths so that you don't get killed that easily. That part is also fun. Like having played several times, trying to get to that like ideal party combination with different Pokemon with good stats, good moves. That part is also fun.
The game is very simple to explain, I think. You
Yep.
catch Pokemon, and then you fight the Pokemon, and then that's how you get to the end. But there's a lot of things to it. The different strengths and weaknesses, all the different varieties, the breathing, like passing on moves, getting moves. There's a lot of there.
I like to think that I'm a pretty smart guy. But I had Pokemon X on my 3DS back in the day, and not to back in the day everybody here who's older than me, but I got stuck behind a rock riding a really big Pokemon, and I couldn't figure out how to get out, and that was the end of the game for me. So, I mean, I know it's
from that.
a little bit. I know the concept is simple, but I feel like it might still be a little over my head.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm right now. I'm trying to find a Mewtwo, and so I'm trying to
Oh, nice.
go through the aisles, some Sebi aisles. I don't know what it is, but anyway. So when I'm working, I have a lot of dead time because of the nature of like today. I have like gaps of dead time, like about an hour at a time, and sometimes I'm reading, sometimes I'm working on something. Today I was working on stuff, but usually I whip out my SteamDeck. And then I play RetroArch, and you can play RetroArch like 8-10 hours on that thing, almost. It's probably not that long, but I've had
That's really good.
on and off. It was like an 8-10 hour workday basically would end up being, and so playing a little here, a little there. It works so great for that, and then I can I figured out a way how I can actually do trades and everything else, and I'm working on an article for that as well on cubiclenate.com. So at some point in time, that subset of a subset of a subset of people might look at what I did. So, Jinda.
Yes.
So you shared something that I think is pretty darn cool, and it's something I've actually played with myself, and I want you to talk about it.
Well, so I had my laptop at a friend's house, and somebody asked me a question about it, and I said, no, it's a throwaway laptop. It's absolute garbage. And they said, oh, it's running Windows 95. And I go, well, yeah, actually, yeah, it is. And I lit it up. And everyone thought it was hilarious. I don't know why. But you can actually download Windows 95 in a file and install it on Windows, Mac, and Linux and run Windows 95 just like back in the day. I don't know. I just thought it was kind of neat and nostalgia, and if you didn't want to play an old game like Nate would or do some old software, you actually can pretty easily run it. But you can also probably run it in a web browser today also, which I'm sure you can. Thomas is nodding his head. Yeah, you can.
So what is neat about this, or maybe not, is what I think is cool is they have FreeCell on there, and my favorite version of FreeCell is on Windows 95, 98.
Yes,
for whatever reason, like I have better graphic ones now. I think it's called like Patience or K-Patience, something like that.
Yeah.
And that's all fine and dandy. I mean, the graphics very nice and everything else, but something about the Windows 95 version is, to me, the best. And I don't know if it's because in typing class when I was, in high school, that's what whenever I got done with whatever it was like an off business services or business something. It's where they teach you how to use spreadsheets and word processors and stuff like that. I would play FreeCell.
Well, if you ever want to run it, you guys can try it out. I do think it's funny. I think it's more nostalgia than anything. So I don't know really if you could do anything really useful anymore.
Yeah, you can write text documents, no problem.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if you can access the host file system in that. I cannot recall.
I think when it starts up, you can pick a directory that you want to use as your hard drive or access point.
Yeah, and I think that's important because you need to be able to work like it's 1995 every once in a while. I think that's a very valuable to be able to do that.
Party likes 1995. Nobody says that.
That's because nobody partied in 1995. I guess I don't know. It wasn't a great partying year. Maybe. I mean, that's when we got Star Trek Voyager. I think that was the problem with 1995. Yeah, definitely check that out if you want to go down retro lane. And it's kind of painful to say that Windows 95 is retro tech at this point, but it's just fun to boot up or to start up on your modern computer just for fun, and full screen it so when people are coming around they have no idea what you're doing. Cool.
Actually, a fun story. I initially installed Linux to run RetroArch, but I've never played.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like I wanted to play Pokemon and other games. I've been doing this emulation on normal computers for a while, on Windows computers, but I recently discovered RetroArch maybe in 2020 or 2021, and I've been using RetroArch since. But I wanted to like rescue my old laptop, which has been sitting there since like 2017, and put Linux on it.
Be perfect.
But I probably installed RetroArch but didn't play because I found other things to explore.
Yeah, probably. And truthfully, I like RetroArch, but I think that my favorite experience with RetroArch is on the SteamDeck at this point. Like I've used it on.
Why? Why do you think so?
Because it's a very easy console type, interface. Basically, it's like a gaming thing. So you can go to whatever your game is, and then you can save your state, turn it off, come back to it. So I mean, you can do that on a computer too. It's just it's not as.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like the RetroArch interface is sort of designed like a console.
Yeah.
So you might feel it's more natural if you're using it on a console. On a computer, like even on computer, I use like a Xbox gamepad to use RetroArch. So like using keyboard is okay, but I don't like it that much. But using a control like a gamepad is more comfortable with RetroArch. So I think I understand what you're trying to say.
All right, well, let's probably move on. Eris, you did a poll, and I was excited about this poll, and I'd like you to talk about it.
What do you think about doing a terminal application party at the Linux Saloon? On Telegram, 82% said yes, that would be great. 7% said no, only nerds and weirdos use the terminal. 11% said indifferent, it's all just whatever to me. And on Matrix, 66% said yes, that would be great. And 33 said no, only nerds and weirdos use the terminal. And finally, on Discord...
Arius, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Did 3 people respond on Matrix? Is that why the numbers are like 66 is 2 and 33 is 1? So 3 people?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Oh, so math's right.
And finally, on Discord, 66% said yes, that would be great. 33 said no, only nerds and weirdos use a terminal. Basically the same result. And following this, the next week, starting next week, we'll be moving to Strawball for everything to unify all the voting, so it's simpler and that way it's all combined.
I'm excited about that move, so we can have one source for straw polls. I wonder how it's going to work. Hopefully people actually click on it, but I'm sure some don't like such things. But I guess we'll cross the bridge when we get to it. So I noticed, Eris, this is a little bit more of a biting poll than you normally do. Only nerds
what
and
do you mean?
weirdos. Like only nerds and weirdos. That doesn't seem like
Oh, 'cause-
something you would say.
Oh, because I didn't write this book.
Oh, who did?
Somebody named the Wolf.
Oh. Oh, he's a jerk. I hear he's
Oh.
toxic.
No, he's pretty good. He's kind of green though.
I mean, actually, I'm wearing green today too.
I thought you guys started 8.
Normally, but this week I had to change the time due to a scheduling conflict. So so I had to either cancel it or shift it a little bit to the
I
left.
missed the memo.
I did pin it in the Telegram. I think I put it in the Discord too. I know.
You didn't put it in the element, did you?
I think earlier today I did, but like half an hour before the show started. But yeah,
Because I like just got the link not too long ago in the element.
yeah. Well, sorry,
Nonetheless,
you're here.
we're here.
So welcome, Dan. Nice to see you. Pop in. Better late than never, but nice to have you
Like
nonetheless.
I said, I missed the memo somehow.
That's all right. Missing the memo is a-okay. I missed the memo too. I was almost late, and things would have gone really bad. All right, so it's time to muddle through the Linux news. As always, a big thanks to Michael from This Week in Linux for mixing up a great flight of topics. So one of the topics I want to bring up is distribution news. Has anybody here heard of Salix? Salix, S-A-L-I-X. I'm not surprised.
Yes,
It is-
Isn't it a Slackware
Yeah.
derivative?
It is. So here is to me. I really enjoy the pitch for Salix. So it's a distribution based in Slackware that aims to be simple, fast, and easy to use and stable. And I was just amused by that.
Emphasis, is it really easy to use?
I have no idea. So it's a lofty goal considering Slackware, which is far from easy to use.
Right.
But not quite as hard to use as Linux from scratch. So Salix is also fully backwards compatible with Slackware, so Slackware users can benefit from all the Salix repositories. It's a desktop-oriented distro and this release updates to being based in the latest Slackware of 15. This update includes Thomas's favorite desktop environment. Do we know what that is?
No.
It's not Window Maker. It's XFCE 4.16, which brings a bunch of updates via GTK3. And now we're moving to GTK4, so yay. It also comes with built-in Flatpak support integration with FlatHub out of the box. This new feature brings a lot of app availability to Salix, as so many developers are now packaging their apps for Flatpak. So if you'd like to learn more, I have some links here that I'm sure Jinder will share. So if Slackware were easy to use and stable and everything that the marketing sales pitch espouses, would anybody here switch to Slackware?
I would give it a better shot. The thing I had with Slackware was its package management, that you had to download and build every package you wanted. Who wants to do that? They want to get the package and use it,
Well, that's
unless you're a
actually-
tinkerer.
That's actually not true. They give you a lot. They give you, if anything, too much, because you can install everything in the repos. And then if you want something from out of the repos, because the repos are not like Debian-sized repos, then yes, you would have to compile yourself.
Because we did a Slackware distro experience quite a few months ago, and from what I recalled from it is I couldn't quite get the packaging system to use its own packages, and everything I wanted to do, I'd use Flatpaks.
Yes, you have to compile Flatpak yourself. There's I forgot about there's a build system that they have so that you can use their own build system to install like Flatpak. According to the Salix website, they feature one application per task on the installation ISO. Because if I remember correctly, Slackware has like multiple text editors and like multiple things for everything, because they give you everything. Because like you said, it might be difficult to install something, so why not just give you everything in the repos at once?
I'm starting to find that everything doesn't necessarily mean everything. Every week there's new stuff in GitHub and GitLab and FlatHub, and I mean it's like things are just growing every week.
It's a little bit like an everything bagel. So they call it an everything bagel, but it's not really everything. It's just a lot of things. So maybe it's more like an everything bagel everything. So not really everything, just a lot of things.
Everything
And that's
in
a
their
good
repos,
thing for us.
Oh, so was that Eris?
everything in their repos, not everything in existence. That you might say maybe the Arch what's it called the build system that they have for Arch, the AUR, maybe that has everything. People say that has everything. I don't know if that's true, but yeah, the Slackware repos are not that big.
I suppose if you go to GitHub and get a tarball package that you can build it with Slackware, true or not? Yes, no?
I can look up that build system that they have, and they have some instructions there how to like install Flatpak, which is kind of like a cheat sheet.
Yeah, I would assume if you get source code from GitHub that any distro can build it.
No, because
No. Oh.
that doesn't work like that, because the compiler you're going to have in your system is going to be dependent on what version of the system you have. Like, let's say, like you're using the Ubuntu 2004. That's not going to have the latest compiler. Maybe the software you're trying to use requires the latest compiler for something, or the latest libraries. And Slackware, like, it only gets updated like maybe every 5 years or something. I know it was the longest time, the longest cycle before it got updated. So yeah, it doesn't work like that. They're gonna tell you you're gonna need this kind of library in your system, maybe this compiler. You have all these different versions, so you just can't install anything.
That is true. Anytime I download something and try and build it, it fails. I've rarely got a build to actually complete. It gets into this thing, it needs this dependency and that dependency, and for the builder.
Iris, I was actually going to talk about package building today. Maybe sometime later. I don't know when Nate wants me to talk.
I want you to talk all the time.
I hope so before Christmas.
So I'm gonna put in the YouTube chat the Flatpak Slack builds. So they have a specific version. It's 1.12.7. Now this is not, I think, the latest version. So there's going to be a specific version for Slack where you're going to have to use because of the libraries, because of the compiler and everything. So somebody make sure that it works, and then they put you the instructions and where you get the files and everything. But you need that specific version, and that specific version is going to work only.
Okay. Somebody's got to ask the tough questions.
Did you have a tough question?
That was a tough question. However, you guys are the right group to have the tough answers.
So if I need an answer for something, Eris is one of the go-to people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. He knows. He's like Mr. Knows More.
Or Shravan, or maybe even Thomas. He knows a lot. Jinda knows a lot. Shickle knows everything. You ask him, he's got an answer for everything. So
well, Shickle has an answer for everything, anyway.
He'll help you for sure. He's answered a lot of my questions for me.
All right, so there is some bad news. I don't know if you heard this. If you're listening to Michael on This Week in Linux earlier today, there is a new Linux malware called Shikitega. I can't remember how you pronounced it, but it's a malware. AT&T's Alien Labs, which why they call it Alien Labs.
After Shikle? Sounds similar.
Well, then it would be.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, but I didn't want to say
If they called it Shickle Linux malware, then it would be undefeatable. Well, they've discovered a new Linux malware that can be used for highly evasive attacks. The infection has been designed for persistence and runs on a wide variety of Linux devices. I tried to find what devices were vulnerable. I couldn't get anything exact. But the researchers dubbed this malware Shikitega, which and the malware seems to leverage the infamous PwnKit vulnerability. There's some CVEs for that. and the overlay FS vulnerability. I would go into a lot of detail. I don't know how much people care.
I think it mainly targets Internet of Things,
Devices.
and it's because it uses some old vulnerabilities that have been around for like a year, I think, or more. And so that's why you gotta keep your system updated. And like they said, it's hard to detect because it slowly like gets the payload going. Like it's not gonna do everything at once. It's gonna be slowly, so you're not gonna notice it actually doing something until it actually works. And then I guess you need some other system to detect it that way.
So what I thought was frightening in the description, it says the malware uses a polymorphic encoder to make it more difficult to detect for an antivirus to detect it. It'll abuse legitimate cloud services to store some of its command and control servers as well. So I guess it falls into the ransomware category. But anyway, it's pretty wild.
As Leo says, the malware targets bad passwords over SSH. So if you use bad passwords, you're gonna get caught by this malware.
Like, what's the reason of using passwords over the SSH? Why not just keys? Like,
Simple.
I've stopped using.
People don't do the correct security things because it's simple. It works for the moment, and they don't think about the consequences sometimes.
So for those that want to get away from using passwords for SSH, I have a great step-by-step on cubiclenate.com for doing key authentication for SSH. So it makes it, I dumb it down to the absolute moron level, so I'm able to do it.
Is it really necessary to have that much configuration? I used to do a lot of configuration, things broke. Then I went to a very simple way. So you just need to disable password and etc sshd.conf or whatever, and then make sure your allowed passwords, allowed keys are there in ssh.authorized keys. That's it. Is there anything else?
I mean, some people say you should use password and key authentication, both.
Nah, I just remove the password option. I don't want any risk.
But
the idea there is something you know, something you have.
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't just be what you know, and then you would need the actual like dongle or something to access whatever you want.
So what I do is actually integrate the SSH keys, authorized keys, which as you guys know, I use Chezmoi for. It's called Chemo, I think. It's pronounced CHEZMOI for managing my dot files across several computers.
Mm-hmm.
So that has an automatic feature. So if you link it to your GitHub, it stores your config files in GitHub. So if you add your authorized keys, like whatever computer is using, the SSH keys to GitHub, it'll automatically populate all those SSH keys on the computers that Chemo is running. So you don't need to even like configure anything. So if you add your key to GitHub, it'll automatically say this is an authorized key to all computers Chemo is running. So the SSHD will automatically recognize that. There's no need to even send the authorized key to the host computer. It's automatic for me.
But what if GitHub gets hacked? What happens to your keys?
Keys are already there. New ones might not be added, but the existing ones are already there.
No, that's what I'm saying. Your keys are there, so they're vulnerable.
No, that's public key.
Oh, private the public keys you mean? Oh,
yeah. That's how it works, right? So the authorized keys files as the public keys. Private keys are there on your computer, so it doesn't matter if GitHub gets hacked because it's just public keys. It's public anyways. Yeah, I don't recommend using, especially SSH, where anyone can access, and most people use 22 port. Like I don't use a 22 port at all for SSH. Like you should not have a password, like at any cost. It doesn't make sense, especially now.
So there's Tailscale. Have you ever used that?
Yep. Every day.
Okay. And I suppose you could do a pre-shared key so that you can log into your system with Tailscale and not pass any passwords?
There's Tailscale SSH, but I have not explored it that much. But like all of my computers are on Tailscale. So the good thing about that is when you SSH into any computer, the IP is constant. regardless of whatever network you're on.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's the really cool part. Like earlier, I used to have like separate SSH configs for when I'm at home over the local network, and when I'm outside the network, I used to like set up like DNS, like what do you call, like no IP. So set up DNS on my router so that I port forward particular ports so that I could SSH from outside the network. But after Tailscale, it's like you don't need anything. IP is always the same.
Hmm.
So it makes SSH very, very easy. Configurations very, very easy. You just need one config for a computer because it always has the same IP regardless of wherever it is.
Yeah, it's cool. I've been meaning to mess around with that, but I just haven't done it. I think I need to at some point in time do that.
It's really easy to set up. Like you just need to install Tailscale from your repos. I don't know if Debian has it. It's old enough, it should have some version. Then just enable a systemd service. That's it. And it'll automatically take you to a login page where you have to log in. That's it. It's really easy to set up. And once you have, you can just type Tailscale status to get list of all the computers and their IPs. So you don't remember the IPs, right? So if you just, anytime you want an IP of a computer, you can just type Tailscale status. It shows IPs of all the computers on your Tailscale network. So yeah, it's really easy. Anytime you want to ping, for pinging also, like everything is really simplified once I like started using Tailscale, like networking wise, because I was using some complex networks. It was very annoying to access some computers.
So then, could you use Tailscale like in a way that access like an internal Nextcloud file share?
Is it running on a VM?
No.
Then how are you running Nextcloud?
On a host system.
Yeah, then if it is on a system, then you can just access it. Just run Tailscale on that system.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna think about that. It might be a potential solution then to maybe.
Yeah, like once you start exploring it, like several things which you found hard will be like, okay, this is super easy. Like, why was I trying those complex solutions? It's like, if you remember, Nate, like in June or July, I was spending a lot of time trying to mess around with networks, NAT traversals, all those complex things which no one understood. I asked people who actually knew what they're doing, like Adam Grubbs and other people who are involved with other distros. It's like, no, why would you ever want to do this? No, this is very hard. But Tailscale, you don't need to do any of this complex stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. If that works as easy as you say, that would be.
Yeah,
like
you can
cat's
even set it
pajamas.
up inside a VM. I tried setting up in WSL, it didn't work that well. But yeah, you can even set it up in VM. So it's like,
Since we were talking about passwords, I posted a link to the top passwords in 2021. Number one is a 6-digit password. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Number two is better because it's longer. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
That's fantastic.
And that's last year. This is not like 10 years ago. That's just last year.
I use those, but in reverse.
but that's the thing, right? Like, as if you have like SSH keys, you don't need passwords. You don't need to remember anything. It always works.
I like passphrases. Like I have like a silly sentence that I use in my head, and I don't know if it's a good idea because every once in a while I'll mess it up and misplace a word, and then I forget my password.
And that's the advantage of like
Bitwarden.
SSH keys with Git too. If you use Git for commits and all,
Yeah.
I think GitHub like it makes it very hard to use passphrases. They want you to use SSH keys. So right now it's once you set up a key for a computer on GitHub, you don't need to worry about authentication anytime. Your pushes, pulls, like everything works.
That's cool. All right, want to move on to another topic. This is more distro news. this will be a little bit more, I think, up Thomas's alley because he is a game distro developer. So there's a distro. This would be my choice game distro though. Nothing against you, Thomas, or Drago OS, but Regata OS 22.0.5 was released. Does anybody know why Regata OS would be what I would use?
Is it based on OpenSUSE?
It is. Ding ding ding.
What did I win?
Nothing. Same thing you won last time. Same prize anyway. So it focuses on the desktop and gaming. It seems to have a lot of conveniences built in to the distro, like out-of-the-box integration with Google Drive, support for configurations for hybrid graphics and notebooks and such. It comes with their own store app, and I would say their store app looks really nice. So if that's something that, I don't know if that's something that you have in Drago OS, Thomas. I haven't checked out Drago OS in a while. But a store app, I think, is very convenient. Actually, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I think that the OpenSUSE folks maybe need to look at that particular thing. It also has something called Game Access Portal, which has an extensive library of games ready to install and a lot of optimizations for gaming, like AMD FSR built in and more. So I don't know what's FSR, Thomas.
AMD FSR is akin to NVIDIA's DLSS. It's
Okay,
not.
what are those?
Okay. So DLSS stands for Deep Learning Supersampling.
Oh,
It's like anti-aliasing, but intelligent. It's able to take, for instance, 720p and upscale it to 1440p 4K with reasonable quality, better than what you would normally get. AMD FSR essentially does the same thing. It's not quite as good, but the advantage of AMD FSR is that it can run on literally any game, whereas DLSS needs to be built into a game, like specifically. And it also can run on any GPU. NVIDIA, AMD, Intel dedicated, like the new Intel dedicated GPUs they're coming out
right.
with. Doesn't matter, it works. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's a little bit better on your battery if you're on like a laptop or a SteamDeck or something like that than DLS would comparatively. I'm not entirely sure. Don't quote me on that. But
Okay, I won't.
The good thing about it is essentially it runs on just about any GPU. It's open source. So if you're an open source evangelist, if you want to only run open source, that's your go-to if you want anything like that. And it can run on literally any game because it doesn't need to be baked into the game. They can bake it into the game if they want to, but you don't have to.
Yeah, DLSS is kind of a touch and go thing with games. Some games it helps them, some games it kills their frame rates.
And not only that, you need a specific kernel version, Mesa version, NVIDIA driver version, and Proton version if you want to be able to use DLSS in a Windows game.
Right.
And I'm not sure there's any Linux native games that use DLSS. So you got to have all your ducks in a row set up properly. Whereas FSR, it basically just works.
Hey Thomas, is that the technology that they use to upscale like old videos to like HD?
No, that's something else. It's not quite as good. The stuff they used to upscale,
I'm gonna post an example on the YouTube chat, so you see how much better the video looks, because I know everybody's seen this video before.
So
Is it like the Rickroll video?
It's probably worth noting that part of the difference between something like FSR and like upscaling videos is that FSR has to work in real time and doesn't have the luxury of sitting around reprocessing over and over again. So they're completely different approaches because they have the ability to spend more time on things that aren't live.
I
Also,
think
did you just Rickroll us?
And I think it makes
in
a
4K.
difference. with really old TV shows and videos like that, also, it depends on like when they were made. If they were made in the 70s and the 80s, there's this thing where some of the shows were done on tape and other ones were done on film. The ones that are done on film will always turn out better because the tape puts a lot of noise and distortion and all that other stuff. That has a maximum limit where the film actually captures much deeper what it sees.
I'm not sure where I read this, or maybe it was in a YouTube video. I can't recall. I'm not sure where I absorbed this information, but I feel like somebody here will likely have the answer. But apparently the AI upscaling is less memory and something intense than actually just running at native resolution at that 4K level or something like that. Somewhere I read that. I don't know if that's actually true or not. I don't understand how that can be possible, but hey, I guess I'll just accept it because I have nothing to rebut it.
I know with DLSS specifically, it's easier because there's hardware specifically designed for that upscaling. FSR, I have legitimately no idea.
So I guess a good way to look at it, and there's a little bit of nuance to everything, I suppose. You know, it's not like if it was as simple as we described it, then you know it would have been a thing a long time ago. But for the most part, rendering things out at like and there's sort of like a level of like diminishing returns as well. The lower you start using this, if you use it at 4K, you're going to notice a much bigger savings than if you use it at like 720p. But in general, when you're rendering out the assets for a game in 4K and everything in the scene is sort of being processed at native resolution, it does take a lot because rather than using a sort of set of lower scaled graphics and then just sort of interpolating that up, and I know interpolating it's not a generous term because it does a lot more than that, but just sort of using a smaller set of data being processed and just scaling it up based on the best possible results is easier because it doesn't actually have to make the entire screen calculation like at once, if that makes sense. Like you're not rendering each individual asset at its maximum resolution. You're rendering them at a lower resolution and it's filtering it up. So it's like the opposite of putting 4K YouTube videos on a 1080p screen, but it still looks good.
It makes me think of Super Troopers. That click, enhance.
That's what it feels like, honestly. It's impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
They got that from I forgot that movie. The movie with Harrison Ford.
Indiana Jones?
No, it takes place in the future.
Oh.
20 Blade Runner.
Blade Runner. They got that from Blade Runner because there's like a video and they keep enhancing it and I think that's where that started from.
I love that so much.
That's funny.
I've somehow been unintentionally rickrolled in 2022.
So another feature that Regata OS has is that I think is pretty great, that I think the KDE folks should look at, is the ability to reset to defaults. So you can go to the control center for Regata OS and restore the default settings to the graphical environment feature, and everything restores back to whatever's default for Regata OS. So I haven't tried it out yet, but I would really like to at some point. So, and it seems like something like maybe Leo and Dan can explore, and they're on their podcast, Linux User Space. So I don't know. I'm suggesting it now. See if that goes anywhere. Probably not. But if you're interested in checking out Regata OS, I'm excited because it's Plasma, Thomas, and it's OpenSUSE based, so it seems like it's a win-win. That actually might be what I'm interested in trying to shoehorn in on a SteamDeck. All right, some other exciting news. Maybe I'm not sure if anybody here uses it, but Blender 3.3 is released. So Blender is a 3D design, usually for artistic application. Although people are also using it for mechanical as well. I would like to learn it for that just because. but it was released last week. It's their first LTS version of the 3.x series. So some of the new features include a new hair grooming system that has a sculpt mode and support geometry nodes, which I think that's pretty cool. Line art modifier is now available to calculate accurate cast shadow and light shadow separation from the given light source reference object. Supports rendering on the latest Intel GPUs, has been added using one API. This requires the Intel Arc GPU. The implementation is primarily focused on this architecture and future Intel GPUs. AMD GPU rendering for Vega generation graphics cards has been enabled on Windows and Linux. Both discrete GPUs and APUs are supported. So this includes GPUs such as the Radeon 7, Radeon RX Vega series, and the Radeon Pro WX 9100. I don't see anything about NVIDIA. And a procedural UV unwrapping. The new UV unwrap and pick UV island nodes open the possibility for creating and adjusting UV maps procedurally using geometry nodes improved. And it's that's actually targeting for the Apple Metal Rendering GPU performance on Mac OS. So there's a lot more going into Blender there. It really seems like Blender is really becoming one of those like standout open source projects. You know, you have like, seems like the open source world lacks in certain areas. And then some areas just kind of excels, like OBS and Blender. So, I mean, what do you think about that? They've improved hair. I think that's in sculpt mode. I think that's pretty darn cool. I mean, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago that they didn't do 3D rendering of hair because it was just impossible to do. Now it's an open source thing. That's pretty cool, I think.
What about the movie Next Gen? Wasn't that like completely done in Blender?
Was it?
Next Gen?
Yeah,
You
was
can
it?
watch it on Netflix?
Yeah, I've seen it. And I didn't know it was done in Blender.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that movie was mostly made in Blender. I mean, as much as possible, I think it was. It was like 99.9%. Like,
Really?
yeah.
Well, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, Blender's way more powerful than everybody gives it credit for, I guess.
I'll have to watch it again and see if I can, I don't know.
Next gen.
Yeah. I watched
Yeah,
it
I'll see
years
if I can
back.
find something.
Yeah, that's pretty
I'll
cool.
see if they still have it on their list. I'm
There you
always
go.
looking for something to watch on Netflix because I don't have any regular TV.
Yeah, I think Blender, there was a project a while ago, it was like Blender Mechanical, and so that was a thing. And I don't know what happened to it. That kind of fizzled out, but I do know that Blender has Mechanical now like built into it, so maybe it just kind of sucked that project into it or something like that. And so my issue with, see, I haven't done it yet. I've been meaning to actually get to it, but it's on the list, big list. But I've been using FreeCAD for things, but sometimes FreeCAD just kind of blows up whenever you want to edit a model. It just doesn't like remember how, it's not really parametric. It's like kind of parametric. So it'd be nice if I had a modeler that was actually parametric. And I don't know if Blender's is as such, but
I never really tried it to see if it was parametric or not.
Yeah. But
yeah, they released Cyberpunk 2077 on Netflix. It's a kind of a cartoonish thing.
Mm-hmm.
The graphics they could have done better work with that. It's really cartoonish.
Well, maybe they didn't have the rendering farm available.
I guess so. The game looks much better than the cartoon does.
Maybe it's aimed for a younger audience.
I don't see how that game could be. It's 18 and above at least. If it was me, 21 and above.
Maybe they're going for a certain kind of style. I'm just making excuses here. I don't even know what the problem is. Well, I always like new hardware, and so in the news, the Kubuntu Focus NX, the Kubuntu team has announced the product. It's a small form factor PC for people who are looking for a powerful computer that doesn't take up a lot of space. It sounds like a Savan thing. The NX is essentially an Intel NUC type of, it's a NUC, so Intel, so probably not Savan's thing then. Type of device that can be configured with either an 11th generation Intel Core i7 or an Intel Core i5. So I would like to have seen maybe 12th generation hardware since it is new, and that is the current generation. But there we go. So it comes with the Iris Xe graphics, 8 gigabytes of RAM, which is configurable up to 64 gigabytes. 250 gigabyte Samsung NVMe, which is configurable up to 2 terabytes with space for second SATA SSD. So you'll see on there one HDMI with one mini display port, 3 USB-A ports version 3.2, and 2 USB-C ports. So that's pretty cool. And an Ethernet port, or Ethernet, if that's how you like to say it. Another interesting feature is that it comes with a set of far-field quad array microphones. So I don't know how well that would be, how well it's going to work, but it could make for some kind of a Mycroft box, possibly. The price for Kubuntu Focus NX starts at $695. So about the cost of a high-end SteamDeck, essentially. Which one did you buy there, Thomas? Not to derail it, but you're obviously playing games and whatnot. So which version did you buy?
I got the highest end version.
Okay, so you went for broke. Good job. So this device is only available for shipping to US and Canada. Another note is that the Kubuntu Focus device is not made by the Kubuntu team. It's a separate company that has a partnership with Kubuntu to use the Kubuntu name in addition to using Kubuntu OS in their products. So if you'd like to learn more about that, I have a link. Seems like there's a lot more Linux-based hardware, or like you can, if you want to buy a computer with Linux on it, like out of the box, seems to be more and more common. Would you say that that's true?
I would say that that's very true. I'd say there's a lot of niche computer-like gadgets kind of like surrounding the desktop version that are coming out in Linux, like all these, single board computers and gadgets in that nature are taking advantage of the Linux community builds.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great. I think it's good news. And the last computer that I bought came with Linux pre-installed, and I think that's pretty awesome. So speaking of pre-installed Linux machines, this is a hardware/gaming news. There are now SteamDeck repair centers. So eventually, when Thomas drops his SteamDeck,
which I did yesterday,
down his concrete flight of stairs, and it breaks, he can take it to one of Valve's repair centers. So previously, if a Steam Deck owner had issues with their Steam device, with their Steam Deck, it could be quite a chore for them to fix it. You can go to iFixit and get the repairs themselves, which is something that I would probably do just because
there's a lot of videos on how to take parts in and out of the Steam Deck. It's highly repairable.
Yeah, a lot of upgrades for it too. So if you have an issue, Thomas, you can send your Steam Deck to one of the repair centers, and someone will diagnose the device and see what kinds of repairs it needs. Fix it, and then send it back to you. These repair centers offer repairs for free on issues covered by warranty. They also offer a diagnostic service for anything not covered under warranty, so the customer can choose to repair it for free or have the device sent back as is. Of course, if you prefer to fix things yourself, repair kits, replacement parts, and guides from iFixit. So I think that's actually one of the neat selling points of the Steam Deck is just how easy it is to get a hold of parts. I mean, basically, Valve has given the entire formula, all the, they've given the CAD files of its shell out as well, so people can build whatever they want for it. And they offer replacement parts, and I think you can pretty much buy everything at this point. You could buy every part individually and put it together if you really felt like it. I think just about every part. So I think it's nice to see that there's a company that is concentrating on actually giving you parts, making things repairable, and not the opposite like pretty much everybody else. It's like the antithesis of Apple, essentially.
Yes.
And that's pretty awesome.
Now, if your Steam Deck would just take phone calls, that'd be great.
Thomas, can you get on that? Phone calls? There's no built-in camera on the Steam Deck, so no video chat. But you could do...
There's no cell modem in the Steam Deck.
Well, I mean, that aside.
I was just joking about that.
I suppose you could probably do like a USB-C module, put it right on the top, that give you like your cellular modem and a camera. That would be possible, I suppose.
If you could get like some kind of voice over IP service, like maybe Zoom or something, I don't know, like maybe Google Voice, it could work technically as a phone.
Yeah, I think Zoom would be pretty good, or even Discord. If you could do like, I'm looking. I put mine in a case because, well, I have to put my things in cases. But yeah, if you had like just one little like a module, like a webcam type module on the top, that would be the cat's pajamas right there. So I've only dropped my SteamDeck once, and it was on the hardwood floor, but it bounced off my foot first. So yeah, which felt
Lucky
awesome.
catch.
Lucky catch.
It felt awesome.
I dropped mine screen down directly on a tile floor.
Oh,
Oh,
man.
nothing
Yeah.
survives tile.
Oh, thankfully it did. It wasn't even scratched. I was impressed.
Wow, that's tough.
Yeah.
You're right. Thankfully it was from like stomach height though, because I was like opening up its little carrying case and it sort of fell out.
Yeah.
So I actually picked mine up without zipping it. That's what happened for me. So actually it fell at about waist height onto my foot.
It's
So.
always that carrying case.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to your chip? I know that you dropped your chip, your CPU, I think, when you build your computer. Did any issues happen with that?
So yes, I did drop my CPU when I was building my desktop. I did have bent pins. I was able to bend them back, thankfully, because the CPU is more expensive than a SteamDeck. And I have been using the CPU ever since then. I'm using it right this second to do this Zoom call.
Well, that's good news. I'm glad you didn't lose your CPU. What kind of CPU was it?
Ryzen 9 3950X.
Oh wow.
Wow.
That would have been a real bummer.
Yeah, that's like the top of the line at the very top. You can't go no top or
Without going Threadripper, yeah.
Yeah.
Or Epic. And I was not about to get a motherboard that expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I've really been debating on whether or not I want to get a 5950X, because if I'm not mistaken, that's the last one that uses the AM4 motherboard. So I'd be able to drop it in and go. And if I'm not mistaken, they're actually on a discount right now because the new 7950X is available. So it'd be a relatively cheap upgrade compared to building it. Because, you know, I want the new shiny, but at the same time, if I get the new shiny, I have to also replace my motherboard and my RAM, and probably my PSU.
See, I would like to get a new CPU as well, but by new I mean not new. Q2 2021. The Ryzen 7 5700G is what I'd like to get.
I was thinking you were wanting to get like a CPU that uses the same exact architecture as your Commodore 64, just on a modern process node.
Yeah, those are called FPG. Wait, FPG. Field Programmable Gate Array, FPGAs.
It's not what I'm talking about.
Oh.
I'm talking about literally take the Commodore 64 CPU and just like fab it using a modern process. So it's using like a 2 nanometer process.
Yeah, so you still have to run at 1 megahertz, otherwise the timings and everything else are still not gonna change.
Yes, but think about how efficient it would be.
I suppose, yeah, changing it from the what is it, NMOS I think they used, and going to CMOS I think would be a incredible improvement as far as power consumption is concerned, I think.
And you might be able to do some other performance improvements in the meantime.
Yeah, there's actually a cartridge you can plug into a Commodore 64 called a Chameleon, which has got a great name. It's a Turbo Chameleon.
Of course you love that.
I bought one. And it has an FPGA, I forget which one. But anyway, so you can actually then run your Commodore 64 at like crazy speeds, but for a Commodore 64. And somehow it's able to keep things synchronized with the rest of the system. I don't know how it works. I think it sounds like magic words, and then it works. So there's that.
Now, if you wait for the AM5 CPUs to come out, now you're going to have to probably wait a while to use them because Linux will have to develop firmware to run them. Is that true?
No, you're thinking about the GPUs. The CPUs is, drop and go.
Because, well, I know they had a lot of trouble with the Intel ones. You can the 12th generation ones only run on Windows 11.
The reason for that is because of that whole big little architecture. With
Yeah, the performance cores and
efficiency cores.
efficiency core deal. Only the Windows 11 sorts that out properly.
Yeah, that's just because of that. Assuming AMD is not going to be doing that, so it should be perfectly fine.
For some reason, I think there's going to be some firmware development needed for added architecture support.
I mean, it's essentially the same CPU architecture. The only difference is they're adding partial support for AVX 512, and that isn't really used at all by a typical desktop user. It might be used on servers, but like we wouldn't see anything.
Right.
For us, it's plug and play.
I'd like the new stuff, but I'd like to see it actually working for a while before I spend that kind of money. It's kind of a weird thing to say.
I like to buy the technology as other people are discarding it. You know,
I
then-
got lots of that around here too. I got that all for distro testing for the Peppermint people.
well, my thing is like, you know, if you stay on the cutting edge of technology, you are going to bleed to death. That's just what's going to happen.
Yeah, especially at the wallet.
Yeah, and so I don't think it's worth all the extra money. I mean, especially for a guy like me. I mean, there is no benefit for me having the top line anything.
Well, you know,
really.
games kind of drag you into the future in that sense, you know. They make the games more and more intense. You got to have more and more powerful hardware to run them so they look nice and they run properly. And if you don't have the latest hardware, you're playing at lower settings, you're not really getting the full enjoyment of it.
And that's why Nate plays Pokemon. You don't need.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna say that's why Nate uses RetroArch.
That too.
Yes, same thing. But even RetroArch, like try playing like the newer Pokemon games. The experience is not that smooth, depending on what computer you use. The frame rates have to be dropped in the settings the same way. Because again, when you're using emulation, it's not as good as like actual stuff. So there's always like efficiency losses, and he's playing Pokemon Red. That's like, or Fire Red. That's like 2004 or 2005. But if you play like newer games which are based on like Nintendo DS or the one after that, NDS, oh, I don't know, I forgot the name. Emulation software for that is not, it's good, but it's not that good. So sometimes the experience is not good.
They've got most of the modern games up to the point where, you know, for the amount of money you spend, you're not watching a movie, you're playing the movie, especially in a lot of open world games.
I still have to finish Legend of Zelda, the original one. So that's on my list of things to actually get through.
The Nintendo one?
Yeah.
NES?
Yes, Game Sphere, Matt. That's why I play things that are pre-2000 because most of my computers are pre-2000.
Have you ever played Zelda 2? The Adventure of Link or something it's called?
I've played it. Yeah, it's more like a platformer almost than it is
Yeah.
over like a top world, whatever.
Have you ever played like Zelda on the Switch? That's awesome. Like it's a nice open world game.
No,
Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, Breath of the Wild. That's like, well, that's probably one of the best games. Like I played at my cousin's place, so I didn't play it for like too long, but 2 or 3 days I played the game was like, so really beautifully designed. And again, Switch is not that powerful of a device, but even then they were able to like sort of optimize it for that. I guess there is Switch emulation in RetroArch too, right? How good is it, Nate? Have you tried it out?
So in order to get the Switch emulation to work, at least you have to have basically the core components out of a Switch, the software, in order to basically activate that. You know, like it's, for lack of a better term, like it's firmware, it's ROMs, whatever, and then you can like, there's actually a Switch emulator built for the SteamDeck, and I actually have one of those Switches, but I just haven't taken the time to try and jailbreak it and pull that stuff off. But it would be kind of nice because then I don't know if you can access the Nintendo Store or stuff like that, or I don't know how all that works, but I would gladly buy stuff off the Nintendo Store with whatever their DRM garbage is on top of it, just so I could have it on the Steam Deck. So I have one device to rule them all.
So you are planning to ditch the Switch?
Well, the Switch isn't very powerful, really, and it can emulate the Steam Deck. Steam Deck can emulate the Switch games, many of them very well. Obviously, there's optimizations for some of those games, but I mean, it's really not a very powerful processor in the Switch. So
You didn't get my pun. My pun was so bad.
Sometimes I'm a little dense, so I don't get everything. All right. I guess on the subject of gaming, Ubuntu Linux gaming efforts are continuing. So Canonical has been putting a lot of effort toward Linux gaming, and I think it's great to see because gaming is a very important component for Linux, the whole ecosystem of Linux, in order for it to grow. So it's taken a while for Ubuntu to start putting their efforts into gaming, as I say, but better late than never. Kind of like I say to Thomas, better late than never.
Most of the effort is compiled into the Steam client that you install in their operating system.
Well, so they've been doing some changes to improving their Snapd versions of Steam by adding Mace utilities to help testing, debugging graphic driver issues and other improvements. So Phoronix has reported that Canonical has also been working on snapping the Feral game mode project. Is anybody here familiar with that?
Right. Yes.
Okay, so for those that are unfamiliar, the uninitiated, it is a daemon for being able to automatically set the CPU frequency scaling governor to performance mode, among other system tuning dynamics, when games are launched, and then restoring them once the game has exited. So game mode has already been available for Flatpaks for some time, so it's good to see the efforts being put toward Snap as well. And I don't know if AppImage is going to get it, but if Snap and Flatpak have it, then all the better.
What's the latest version of Feral's game mode?
No idea.
Does it say? I've been on the same one for like a year and a half.
I bet Jinda knows. He'll probably share that information quickly because that's just how he works.
I'm gonna.
So I think it's fantastic news because it shows Ubuntu's putting continued effort toward improving Linux gaming. And I know that not everybody here is a gamer. I wouldn't consider myself a gamer. I'm like a casual, retro-ish gamer. But I'm a gamer. I think Linux gaming is critical because in order for it to grow, then there has to be gaming has to be better on Linux. Although I will say
the newest Feral interactive game mode thing from GitHub. The last time it was updated, it looks like July of 21st of July.
All right, so there's a discussion going on in the YouTube chat, and I was going to respond to it in text, but I think that I can't type and talk. So, Eris, you stated what constitutes retro gaming? 10 years old, pre-2000, before the 1990s. What is the cutoff line for retro gaming? I would consider the modern era of gaming, like probably around, I'm going to say about 2006. I'll call it the modern era of gaming. Maybe even sooner. Like when Doom, was it Doom 3 or something like that? Like I would still consider, not the new Doom that came out, but the new Doom, the not as new Doom.
Okay.
The Doom from the floppies?
No. Not 90s.
Doom you can put on anything.
Not the one you can run on a toaster. The Doom that came out, it was a big deal because it actually ran native Linux. I think it was 2006. The LQ Larry says Donkey Kong. That's retro gaming.
Well, isn't Grand Theft Auto like 9 years old now?
Well, the
last one, the
Yeah.
one, right? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, but they haven't came out with the new one yet.
I think retro gaming is 3 systems back as far as consoles.
Okay.
So not the latest, but not the previous one, but the one app before that. So let's say it's like the PS3, I think.
Okay.
And back.
Now, isn't the PS3 still supported by the PlayStation Network though?
That I'm not sure.
I thought it was, but I could be wrong. They were going to mothball it, but they didn't. They ended up not mothballing it as quickly, as I said. But that is a good question. What is the cutoff for retro gaming?
Is it just a style? Could I make a game today that looks retro?
I think
Yeah, you could, but is that retro gaming?
I don't know. I'm asking more than I'm telling.
I think people
call that retro style, not retro. a retro game has to legitimately be over a certain age, whereas you can have a retro style game which is in the style of a retro game but is made more recently.
So
The
what's the
game
cutoff,
has to
Thomas?
be vintage.
Yeah,
Right,
but like wine vintage, it can be year old, and that's considered vintage because the vintage is the year. But what actually constitutes? What's the cutoff?
so my
Classic.
Something
line,
which is like 10 years old, or like as Aris says, like 2 generations old on consoles.
my line is anything pre Nintendo DS. So like
But
I think the GameCube came out before that. I don't know, but like Game Boy, Super Nintendo, NES, Sega Saturn, Sega Genesis, anything Sega really.
so Leo says anything that's 20 years is the cutoff for retro. Now I
Isn't
think
20 years also the same thing for cars?
yeah, I think that's when it becomes an antique after 20 years.
Yeah,
That
would
means my truck is an
probably be
antique.
I would probably say that's like a good general. Like if you're not sure if it's over 20 years, it's probably retro.
All right, so I went to this vintage computer fest in Elmhurst, Illinois last week, and there were the Macs there from the late 90s, like the iMac, and like remember that one Macintosh had like those crazy colored laptops that were more bezel because they were round than anything else, like the clamshells. I kind of felt like those were not really considered retro yet, but then I realized, well, I'm much older than I realized, and time has passed much quicker than I realized, and so those are, and that would meet Leo's criteria. 20 years is the cutoff. Now, Henry? Hopefully I'm saying it right. Henry? Yeah, that's an I. Henry says anything pre-mobile. So when he said, well, I don't know if he means mobile as in the mobile phone or mobile as in Game Boy Mobile. I don't know to which he's referring.
So not even Game Boy, the original one, is by that logic.
Right.
Retro game.
Smartphone, he says. So I say anything. I like, to me, I think that anything Nintendo 64 and newer is modern gaming because I basically fell off the gaming wagon after Super Nintendo. But that's me.
So you didn't like 64?
I rejected the controller so hard. I says I will not touch this asymmetric piece of garbage.
I like the controller. I'm one of the few people that like the N64 controller.
Yeah, I can't. I have 2 Nintendo 64s, and I do not enjoy playing them. I think I got a controller for one of them that's like reasonable and normal, and I will use that controller, but the buttons don't all line up correctly. So I think it was a step backwards from the Super Nintendo controller.
If I can derail the conversation
Yes,
even
please
more,
do. Mm-hmm.
What constitutes an oldie song?
But that's funny because I was thinking about it. You know, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Are you familiar with that? So after a song is like 20 or 25, or a group is 20 or 25 years, they can be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm not sure exactly the time span. And there are things being inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that basically was from, you know, my 20s, I think. I'm sorry, my late teens. And yeah, Cleveland does rock. And it's really disconcerting. It's like, no, Linkin Park shouldn't be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's not that old, is it? Well, yes, it is. You know, things like that. But
Yeah, I get some Detroit radio stations, and they have one when I was in my 20s. They played on it songs from the 50s and 60s, you know, and nowadays they're playing songs from the 80s and 90s on that station, and they're following the same format throughout all the years that they go so far back and play these songs like that.
so the song from Rob Zombie, let's go way off track here, Dragula, would you consider that classic metal?
Is it even metal?
I don't know. I think
It kind of sits on the line between what I would consider rock and metal.
I
Yeah,
think it's
that makes
industrial
sense.
technically.
industrial technically. So is it considered? So to me, this is what I would call like metal. But I understand industrial music, but I always consider it. I mean, it's old enough to be a classic.
So is Ozzy Osbourne's Diary of a Madman album, and now he's just released a new album.
That's still not classic rock because it's just been released.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a little bit weird. It's a little bit weird.
I know what you're feeling.
Yeah. I'm not sure how to process all this.
And I still have copies of a lot of it.
I still buy CDs.
I still buy vinyl records.
Well, that's fashionable now.
Mm-hmm.
Big business. I think they said that recently the biggest year for vinyl records was last year, I think, or something like that, or 2 years ago. Ever?
Yeah, they're getting a little too pricey now. And not only that, a lot of companies have been into making reproductions. I mean, Walmart's even got a line of vinyl records.
Well, vinyl's kind of cool. I just need to get an actual player.
My equipment's all from 1978.
That's retro.
Did you buy
right
it yourself, or did you get it secondhand?
Well,
he bought it originally, still has the box.
No, actually, I bought the receiver. I bought the receiver 20 years ago, not working, and rebuilt it myself. It's awesome. A Pioneer 1250 SX. It's got 100 watts aside. My cousin gave me the Techniques turntable, and he was cleaning out his garage. He's like, "Here, do you want this junk?" And that's what got me back into vinyl records. Is he was going to throw this junk out. So I took the Techniques turntable, put a $200 stylist on it, because that's the most expensive piece of the turntable. And it works really well. And then I spent some time over the last decade before COVID going to music shops and buying up records and stuff like that. Crate digging's a lot of fun.
Well, on that bombshell, it is that time of night. Now I have to. We're going to end sooner tonight. We started an hour early. We're going to end about an hour early because of a scheduling conflict that I have. But I do want to thank Michael one more time. Michael from This Week in Linux one more time for providing a great flight of topics for us to talk about in the news. So thank you very much, Michael. I do appreciate all the work you do. It gives me just a little bit of extra time during the week. All right, so coming up next week, we're going to be doing, based on the survey that Eris did, I'm still going to say he did it because it was so biting, we're going to do a terminal application extravaganza. So he said party, but I changed the name to extravaganza. Although maybe I said party initially. Anyway, we're going to do an extravaganza of terminal applications. So if you have any really cool terminal applications that you would like for us to try out this week, put them in the Telegram, the Matrix, the Discord for suggestions and whatnot. But we're just going to bring our favorite terminal applications, how we use them next week, and just have a good old terminal time fun. So I challenge the Saloon to use Ash. It sounds like a swear thing. I don't know if you can swear, Leo. But what's Ash?
It won't burn my computer down, will it?
I have no idea. So Henry. CDs didn't kill the radio star. It was something else. Video killed the radio star. That's a great song, by the way.
They have a lot of them really old YouTube MTV videos that they did back then on YouTube now.
I believe that's the first video that MTV showed.
I think so.
Live.
I thought I heard that before. But it makes me think of the song Pop Goes the World. Have you heard that song before? From, I think, Men Without Hats or Men at Work. I don't know what it's called. But Pop Goes the World. It's a fun song. I don't want to copyright strike, so I'm not going to play it. So anyway, next week, terminal application extravaganza. Bring your terminal applications, and let's have a chat about which ones you think are really cool, how we use them, and we'll have a good time. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move into last call. So Destination Linux is streaming live tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern. So it's going to be super fun, according to Michael. They had an interview planned, but unfortunately that fell through, which means they need to pivot pretty hard, and so they decided to make like a special edition that's going to happen
I think
tomorrow.
Michael said it's so special that he and Jill do not know what the shows will be about except Ryan. So it's a big secret.
Well, that sounds very special. All right, so that's tomorrow at 1. Linux User Space. Coming up on the 26th, Alpine is the distro, so check that out. The next episode coming up on the 26th of September, Alpine is the distribution. For Linux Out Loud, it's a podcast I'm a part of. We talked about Linux gaming distros. It seems like it's like a gaming week, I guess. And also, they're not here, but I do want to shout them out. You know, Rick, not a Linux guru, he does a Saturday stream now, so you can check that out. Mark Yu from the Atlanta Linux Enthusiast. They meet tomorrow at 3 in the afternoon. And then if you want more things on me, go to keepinglate.com. I write stuff, and sometimes I make other things, so you can check that out. So Linux Saloon is part of the Tux Digital Network. Check out more great shows at tuxdigital.com. I want to thank you all for being part of the conversation in both the Zoom meeting and the YouTube stream, as well as everyone for watching the show after the fact. I want to thank everyone involved in making the Linux and open source tools possible for us to not only have this conversation, but also to have fun and enjoy our technology. Linux truly puts personal back into personal computer. Thank you for stopping by. Be sure to tip your developers, and please remember to Linux responsibly. Until next time, see yous.
Peace out.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
No, Leo, you're the best. And gotta mute that. I love ice. I think it's the 1 p.m. Eastern. Although I did see something about, where did I read that? There's somewhere I read something. You know what? I just read, and good thing I distilled these things down. They're on. They're going to be talking about that, and there's something else I thought. Yeah, that's what they're going to be doing.